Greetings, folks, and welcome to yet another poorly made computer review video, I guess. It's not really a review. Computer overview, historical reference, whatever you really want to call it, of this. A Power Macintosh model 7100/66. The 7100, which otherwise wouldn't be a terrifically notable machine, is notable for the fact that this was the first, with an asterisk, PowerPC-based Macintosh in Apple's lineup. Now that asterisk is because it shares that designation with two other models. The 6100, which was a pizza box style thing that I guess you could say was designed to replace the LC, although the LC at the time, which would have been the LC 630, was a bigger machine than the original pizza box LCs that people think of. There was this 7100, which was basically a Macintosh 2 VX with a PowerPC processor that was designed to be the expandable desktop, the full-size desktop kind of machine. Then there was the 8100, which was the tower version. The 7100, in particular out of the bunch of three, is notable as well for its code name. We gotta go a little bit back in time for that. You see, the Power Macintosh 7100 is basically, as mentioned, loosely based on the Macintosh 2 VX. Or, I suppose the alternative is you could think of it as being loosely based on the Quadra 650, and that's probably closer to reality. But either way, the Quadra 650 was a 68040 machine, and in the case of all three of these, basically that's what it was. It was a PowerPC processor masquerading as a 68040 placed on a Motorola 68K logic board. A fraud, if you will. And so Apple chose to give these machines fraud code names. The 6100, a machine that I would like to get someday, was codenamed Piltdown Man. The 8100 was codenamed Cold Fusion, and that's a codename that was shared with some of the really early Macintosh clones that, as far as I can tell, were based on the same architecture. And the 7100 was codenamed Carl Sagan, for the astronomer. Now, these were internal code names, not designed to be leaked to the public. And, quite frankly, why Apple, seemingly, considered Carl Sagan to be a fraud, I don't know, and it's not really important to our discussion anyway. But needless to say, in a 1993 issue of Mac Week, these code names leaked. Carl Sagan got wind of it, and was afraid that the public would see this as an endorsement that would sully his good name. So he wrote to Apple and threatened to sue if Apple did not confirm to the public that the Carl Sagan name had nothing to do with him. Of course, Apple refused, and Carl Sagan wrote a letter to the editor that appeared in a 1994 issue of Mac Week, informing readers of what was going on. Following this letter, some rogue at Apple changed the code name of the 7100 to BHA. Can you guess what that stands for? If not, it stands for Butthead Astronomer. I wonder why they changed the name. Of course, that also leaked, prompting Mr. Sagan to sue Apple for libel, a case that he lost because the code name was merely an expression of opinion, not a fact. Not satisfied with that particular verdict, Mr. Sagan issued another lawsuit, and that began a little bit of a brief period of lawfare between Carl Sagan and Apple before culminating in 1995 with another court settlement, Apple issuing a public apology over the code name and no further lawsuits, I guess. Wrapping that little bit of story up, there was one final code name change after this settlement. LAW, short form for lawyers are wimps. In any case, Carl Sagan, Butthead Astronomer, Lawyers are Wimps, or Power Macintosh 7100 Whatever you choose to call it, this machine was introduced in March of 1994, discontinued in January of 1996, and is basically a Macintosh 2VX with a PowerPC processor on it. Or, again, I suppose you could consider it a Quadra 650 with a PowerPC processor on it. Initial models of the 7100 shipped with a 66 MHz PowerPC 601 processor. Later models upgraded that to an 80 MHz 601. In addition, there were two models of each offered. Both this regular 7100, which shipped with the video card that had 1 MB of video memory on board, expandable to 2 MB. There were also the 7100 AV models, the 7100/66 AV and the 7100/80 AV later on, which bundled a video card with 2 MB of video memory, I believe expandable up to 8, and an S-video input and output. Taking a look at this with the cover taken off, I'm going to do a lot of comparisons between this machine and the 2VX because that's the version of this particular system that I'm most familiar with. And as mentioned, they're basically the same with a couple of minor differences. You can see the area where the power supply is a little bit different. It's not quite the same. But otherwise, if you're familiar with the 2VX, you'd be very familiar with this. There's a slightly different logic board design, but not too terrifically different from the 2VX once again. It does have 4 slots. I think the Macintosh 2VX only had 3, but I guess I'll correct myself in post if I'm wrong about that. Coming around to the other side, not really a whole lot that you can see. This cage is mostly in the way, and given the case plastic situation, which I'll get into here in a minute, I do not really want to risk pulling this entire assembly off and breaking something irreversibly. I suppose I'll have to eventually because this thing will at some point need to be recapped, but for the time being it's working, so for the time being I'm going to choose to ignore all of that. One other difference with the 2VX is indeed the optical drive. The 2VX used a caddy loading CD-ROM drive. I believe so too did the Quadra 650. See right there is a representation of the onboard system memory. 8 whole megabytes of onboard memory. The machine would have been shipped either with that 8 megabytes or optionally with 16 megabytes. This machine takes 72-pin SIMs. You could install, if you had 4 32 megabyte SIMs, you could install a maximum of 136 megabytes in one of these machines. Hard drives, well, this would have shipped stock either with a 250, as in the case of this, Conar CFA 270S, which actually suggests to me that's a 270 megabyte drive, but that's neither here nor there. Either a 250 or a 500 megabyte hard drive. SCSI, of course. SCSI optical drive. I believe that is, what? A 2-speed CD-ROM drive. Probably a Panasonic. Again, as is Apple's wont. Most of the machines that I've seen from Apple with OEM drives have been Panasonic. And of course, there's your floppy drive with the proprietary connector, as per the usual. If we go ahead and squeeze the camera in here between this video card, which we'll get into in a second, and the power supply and all of this other stuff here, you can see 2 slots that are both populated. I believe that the leftmost one needs to be populated in order for the machine to work. As you can see, or maybe you can't see, it's labeled ROM SIM, and right beside that is a cache SIM, which was optional. This machine could accept up to 256 kilobytes of level 2 cache installed in that slot. Again, it was optional. This one is fitted with it, which is a pretty nice performance boost. Taking a look at the back of the machine, I believe that this is, once again, mostly the same as the Macintosh 2VX. There's 2 audio jacks there. microphone in and a line out for speakers, a single ADB connection, 2 Apple serial ports, the rightmost of which, if I could talk, is a GeoPort compatible Apple serial port. We'll get into that port in a second. There is an AAUI15 port right there for Ethernet that I don't believe the 2VX had, but again, if I'm wrong, I'll correct that in post. There's a SCSI connector there, power, and of course your connections for the power to the computer and going out to the monitor, as was commonplace back then, but not something you'll see anymore. So, this port, what the hell is this? Well, it's labeled monitor, but it certainly doesn't look like any standard video port, and indeed it's not. It is a very proprietary Apple thing that they used once. This is an HDI45 video connector, and what it was used for were the Apple AudioVision 14 monitors that were a 14-inch CRT combined with speakers, AV inputs and outputs, ADB ports, and also S-Video. Basically an AV center, and as is Apple's want, they wanted to cut down on the cable clutter so you didn't have to plug in all these connectors into the back of your machine, and they simplified all of those outputs into one little connection, HDI45, as you can see right there. Now, out of the box, on all of these, they support dual displays, but you'll notice there's only one display connector there. And that's where this comes into play. This is the PowerPC version of the processor direct slot. It's more like an edge card connector. And Apple fitted these things with video card. Either this, which is just a standard, what they called a high-performance video. See, there's the onboard video memory there, a couple of chips, and you could expand the video memory. Or the AV card, which this is not. You can see there's no AV inputs or outputs on this, just a single DB15 connector, which I've adapted to HD15 so I can use my flat panel display that I've got sitting here. As mentioned, these support dual displays out of the box. Now, that's not to say that you couldn't fit these things with a new bus video card. There are 3 new bus slots here. But one gotcha with this machine and the 8100 as well is that they will not run, at least not reliably, unless you have something in this processor direct slot. That was how this came to me, with nothing in it. I tried fitting a new bus video card that I've got sitting somewhere. I don't actually know where it is at the moment. And it didn't work. So I can't deny that these will not run without something present in the processor direct slot. That was why I picked this up and I had to use it. Because of course, even though Apple did sell adapters for this HDI45 connector that would allow you to use, well, other things, they're hard to find and expensive when you do. And I tried finding one, found one for a really reasonable price, paid for it, and then the seller canceled my order saying that they realized it was the wrong part. What they actually had was one of the PowerBook video adapters, which is far more common than the HDI45 one. Oh well. Of course, using the video card is preferable, because the video card has got its own video memory. That HDI45 thing uses some of your onboard system memory. And in a system with 16 megabytes of RAM, even in 1994, you would have been feeling the missing system memory. I believe up to 640K would have been used for video memory on one of these machines. Another gotcha with these old Macintosh systems, and unfortunately a lot of people don't really pay attention to this, is the battery. You can see right there is where it would be inside that black housing. These use one of these. Well, not one of those. But one of these kinds of batteries. These are 3.6 volt what they call inorganic lithium batteries. Here's one example from the Sonnenschein Battery Company. This is the only one I've ever actually seen in person of that particular example. Usually what you find are either these purple Tatarans, some older systems will have the black Vardas, or these red Maxell ER3s. They're all bad news when they fail, because lithium thionyl chloride explodes rather violently when it comes in contact with air, when it comes in contact with moisture, which is in the air. When these things start to degrade, the casing opens and then it's game over. The Maxells are the worst ones. You can see this one here, actually, funny enough, came out of my 2VX. Pretty nasty stuff. I don't know why I kept all of those, but kind of neat to look at, I guess, if you're a weirdo like I am. The other issue, of course, that plagues these, and basically any other vintage Macintosh from this time frame, is the plastics. As you might have guessed, they're extremely fragile. Now, fortunately on these, most of this case is made out of metal. But this entire back panel is all plastic. And it's not in very good condition anymore. The front is even worse. In fact, this whole front panel actually fell completely off. I've had to fix it. It was broken in the listing pictures on eBay, but it broke even more at the hands of the shipping company. I don't remember exactly who delivered this. I think it was the post office. But, yeah, not in very good condition. If anybody happens to have a lead on a 3D printing model for one of these front bezels, or knows someone that's selling 3D printed front bezels, or knows someone that's selling the bezels themselves, I would love to know, because I'd like to make this thing complete and cover up that front little bit, just to make it look a little bit nicer. Most people, I'm sure, are well acquainted with the Macintosh startup chime from this particular time period. These first-generation Power Macintosh systems do not use that chime. These actually use I'd call it unique, but it's not really unique. I guess it's unique to those three particular models, and maybe even the Macintosh clones that use the same Cold Fusion logic board that the 8100 used. But it's actually a guitar chord that I believe was strummed by Stanley Jordan. It's very unique, and this is the first example of Macintosh computer that I own, that uses this, what I'll call the 5th generation Macintosh startup chime. Of course, it is now time to power the machine on. So here I have the keyboard and a Kensington Turbo Mouse trackball that I'm using because the power computing mouse that I was using with this setup is, well, to put it bluntly, a giant piece of crap and doesn't actually work properly. This Kensington Turbo Mouse doesn't really work either, but it does work better than that power computing mouse ever did. So, here we go. It'll take it a bit to power on as it tests the memory. Here it comes. Some brave soul, bless them, whoever it was, I don't remember, installed Mac OS 9.1 on this machine, which is more than a little bit much for it, considering the limitations. I think it's got a total of 36 megabytes of memory in it at best. So this is going to be a candidate at some point for a reload of the operating system, probably System 7.6. My understanding is that these ship with System 7.1.2. keeping in mind that it was released in 1994. Later models probably would have shipped with 7.5. Of course, I could change the date and time, but it's not going to matter since there's no battery. If I had designs on setting this machine up in a permanent home, I would get some batteries for it. I should probably get some of those LS14250 batteries anyway. But since this one's probably going into long-term storage, I don't think I'm going to put a battery in it. Well, it's actually got 80 megabytes of RAM. So 72 megabytes in Sims. But yeah, 80 megabytes really isn't enough for Mac OS 9. And they've even turned virtual memory off. Whoever had this machine. The hard drive is pretty filled up. But I think most of that's just in the system folder. This monitor is not running at native resolution. It could probably go higher than this with this video card, but I've got a adapter on it that's being force set to 832 by 624, I think is the resolution. Yeah, so it's being forced. We are operating at millions of colors, though. So here you can see the RAM, which must be installed in pairs. 2 32 megs and 2 4 megs. I imagine that those 2 4 megs are probably original to the machine. So it would have made it shipped with 16 megabytes. See more information. PowerPC 601 at 66 megahertz. There's the ROM revision. And here, take a look at all this stuff. Interestingly, the video card shows up as being on the new bus, even though it's not. And this doesn't really give you much information. I'm wondering if that is for the built-in video, and that the processor direct video is not actually showing up. There's a CD-ROM. It is indeed a Panasonic CR8004. And the hard drive itself. Tells you all kinds of information about it. 270 megabytes unformatted. According to it. It's about 250 megabytes normally. So, definitely a candidate for future work. And I will get that work, time permitting. I do have some AUI adapters. It would be kind of nice to put this thing on the network. The speaker is pretty nice.
Uh-oh.
the internal stuff. AV connector, that's probably the HDI 45 output. Of course, sound devices. Like I said, data on the drive, there's not really much here. I think pretty much all of this is just application software that would have come with Mac OS 9 and Mac OS 9 itself. There's not really much to see. So, I think that's pretty much it. It's a pretty good overview of the Power Macintosh 7100. So, with that being said, stay tuned. At some point there will be a video where I reload the Mac OS on this, but I don't know when that's going to be. Thank you for watching, and if you have any comments, feel free to leave them below.